Hi, I'm Anthony Salvatore Luciano Raimondi, and I'm chatting with Staxx. If you don't like it, start your own podcast. If you like it, press the like button. If not, hey, there's a million and one other podcasts you can look at. There's no big deal.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Anthony Luciano Raimondi. Do you remember when Costello's tomb got blown up in New York?
Yes, I heard about that. Yes.
So there's a bunch of different reasons why the tomb was blown up.
Well, the tomb exactly wasn't blown up. The door was blown off.
Yeah, the door was blown off, but they tried to blow up to get in there. And there's different reasons on why it happened. Do you know what they said on the street?
There are a couple of different reasons. One was, quote, to desecrate his body, being that certain people didn't like him. The second one was to get in there and to open up the coffin because he supposedly, and I said supposedly, had all this very, very expensive jewelry on him. Like back then when he got buried, you're looking at maybe it was $100,000 worth of jewelry or more on him. And then who said he had money buried in there? I mean, there was a lot of different stories.
Yeah.
There was a lot of different stories that went around about that.
There's a myth that Carmine Galante was a major narcotic dealer who had
he was
inroads in Canada, New York, and Sicily.
Right.
Galante was an extreme loyalist to Joe Bonanno. Galante saw how Costello backed the commission's decision to exile and shelf Bonanno. All this happened while Galante was locked up, and he even said that he was saddened to hear that Costello passed away because he wanted to kill him once he got released from prison. Not to mention, Galante always thought Costello was soft and was not a gangster through and through.
Well, with Carmine Galante, he was cousins to my grandfather on my father's side. They were like, I think, second or third cousins, somewhere around there. And he was running the Bonanno family at the time. But he definitely was a major, drug smuggler, if you want to call it drug smuggler, deal. Well, he didn't go out and deal it, but he had the drugs brought in like quarter-ton blocks, which is 500 pounds at a clip. But what happened with that, the story I got with that was that he was bringing in so much drugs and the heat was like tremendously, like the cops, the FBI, everybody tremendously going after everybody. And he was told, listen, pull it back, cut it down quite a bit, let things quiet down, then just do something, do what you want to do, but do it, softly, shall we say, or do it quietly. Well, Carmine was, really, he didn't give a damn what anybody said. So he said he was going to do things his way. So what happened, he done things his way, and when they had to take care of him, they went to my grandfather, because my grandfather is related to me. My grandfather was in the Black Hand, and my grandfather says, blood or no blood, he says, I got to give the okay. So he gave the okay. But the funny thing is, in Joe and Mary's restaurant that had the backyard, where you could go and eat and everything, that place was always frequented by judges, DAs, lawyers, ADAs, cops, FBI agents, and they all went into this place to eat all the time. Now, the funny thing is that when they came in, the story is that they came in through the backyard, they blasted him and his cousin got killed, and they just walked right out the door into a car that was right in front of the place waiting for them and drove away. Now, remember, you had judges in there, you had politicians, you had district attorneys, you had cops, you had feds. Well, they just, they turned around and looked the other way because now, well, guess what? Boom, problem solved, no more problem. So sometimes the government will turn and look the other way as long as the problem is getting solved.
It says here that Galante had grudges with Rusty Rastelli, whom the commission had named top banano Gambino underboss Anil Delacroix. Galante and Delacroix, the two were two peas in a pod, naturally hated each other's guts. Besides, Galante still held a grudge against Delacroix because he whacked a couple of Galante's heroin dealers.
Well, the only reason I could see if he did that is because they came into his territory and they were dealing, and he said he didn't want it in his territory. So if you keep going into the guy's territory and dealing, he's telling you once, twice, three times after that, fuck you, you're going. That's what they don't understand. If you're going to do something in somebody's area, whether it's drugs, gambling, bookmaking, you want to open up an after-hour club, or you want to open up a gambling parlor, you go to whoever's territory that is, and you tell them, this is what you would like to do. And then you tell them, and this is what I'll give you. You give them a percentage, like whether it's 25%, whether it's 1/3, or whether you go 50-50 with them, whatever the situation is. You go and you ask permission to go into the area. When you don't ask permission and you just go into the area and start doing things, you're going to have a problem. And I know that was like that deal, like I told you, with Henry Hill, when Uncle Mike DeCenti, he had the Cosmopolitan Lounge in Staten Island years ago. I had the bookmaking going out of there. And I noticed that my book was dropping like 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 a week. It was dropping off.
So what? People weren't paying in, or they just weren't borrowing the money?
Not that they weren't paying. No. Let me finish the story. And I kept telling my runners what's going on. And they told me, they said, there's a guy in here who's dealing, and they're buying all the shit from him, and they're not buying they're not playing as much book as they are with me. I said, well, who's the guy? The guy happened to be Henry Hill. That's exactly what it was. I met with him, and I told him very nicely, I says, don't come back here again. I said, if you come back here again, I'm going to put you on life support. End of story. Because he was dealing drugs there. Now, Uncle Mike DeCenti, who I called him Uncle Mike, but he was a friend of mine, close, he did not want drugs in his place at all. That was just like totally out of the question. No drugs in the place. I mean, Uncle Mike had a lot of things going for him, Shylock and the book, the this, the that, whatever, but no drugs, especially in the club that he had a piece of. And he also used to own Castle Harbor Restaurant in Sheepshead Bay also. Now, Tony Napoli, who was Jimmy Knapp's son, which if you read on the book, I don't know if I put it in book 1 or I got it in book 2, I had introduced his son, Tony, to Laura, his wife, because she lived right across the street from me. But Jimmy Knapp didn't want drugs in there, and Tony Knapp didn't want drugs. Tony was, how can I put it? He never got straightened out, but he had power. Believe me when I tell you, he had power because he was doing a lot of things, especially when he was in Las Vegas and he came back to New York and everything. He was doing a lot of different things. Even after his father died, even after Jimmy Knapp died, because Jimmy Knapp died, it was in the 90s, Tony still had power up until the day he died. Because Tony, I think, was 80, I don't know, 82, 83, somewhere around there, maybe 84 when he passed away. Because he passed away, I think, about a little over a year after Laura died. Because Laura had the cancer and she had passed away. Certain idiots, shall I say, they say, oh, I was at the wake and you weren't there. Well, first of all, I was out of town. That's number one. Number two, I was at Laura's funeral, and I never saw these people at Laura's funeral either. And number three, there's 1,000,001 people that can back up that I introduced Tony to Laura. And matter of fact, his daughters heard the story also. They knew about it. And there's other people that knew it. So when people say things like that, as I look at it this way, it's either they're talking out of jealousy or they're looking for their 5 minutes of fame or whatever, which, jealousy is a screwed up thing. Jealousy will fuck you right up. Let me put it to you that way.
Do you see a lot of people getting in trouble over drugs?
Yeah, quite a few people get in trouble over drugs. Quite a few. But the thing is this, you see, there are some people that they'll never open up their mouth and they'll go and do time, however time, how much time it is. And but then there's other guys that they're looking at. Here's the thing with the drugs, and they're looking at 20 years or 25 or 30 years, and they say, "Fuck it," and they turn around and they become witnesses because the government put out a thing. It was called 848. Now, this was back in, oh God, in the 80s when they put it out. 848 was made strictly for drug dealers, and that meant life without parole. So if the feds hit you up with 848, now you could get a 20-year 848, which means you got to do the whole 20 years. You're not coming out on parole. But when they hit you with 848 with 100 years, that means you're going to die in prison because you ain't going to make it to, especially like if you're 40, you ain't going to make it to 140.
No,
You
but
know
is
what I'm
that for
saying?
people that have priors? Like if you have priors, you get caught again.
No. If you had priors, it didn't make a difference. This was for strictly drug dealers. It was called 848. Now I remember I heard about this when I was in Lewisburg prison when I heard about that 848. Then like about 6 months or so before I was going home, they shipped me into Danbury, and I met a couple of guys in there that were telling me about that they had this 848, who had 15 years, who had 20 years, and they were already in like maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So 848 could run as many years as they want, but is absolutely no parole. You're not getting off for good behavior. You're not getting off for work time. If you got 20 years on 848, you're doing the whole 20. The whole 20 you're doing right to the door. You're not getting any breaks on it no matter what. No matter what they say, what they do, you're not getting a break on it.
Why do you
Just like
think?
RICO, with the RICO Act, they made that for organized crime. I mean, they hit you with a RICO Act, you got a serious problem.
Yeah, because they can tie you into a bunch of people that you have nothing to do with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They could tie you into people that you have nothing to do with. They could tie you into people that you might have met them at one time and say, hey, hello, how are you? Somebody introduces you to them. You shake hands with them and you never see them again. But they put the RICO Act in and say, well, you know what? Staxx knows this guy and this one knows this one. Let's get them all together. And a lot of times that's how they get guys that have been forming on them.
Why do you think drugs was such a taboo thing in the mob, but a lot of them were still involved with drugs? They would tell you not to do it, but they were involved themselves.
All right, well, let me put it this way. Taboo meaning you don't want your family, anyone in your family getting involved in drugs. In other words, taking drugs. And then they get a habit on drugs. You didn't want that. That's number one. Number two, you didn't want it sold near children or schools or anything like that or young kids. But the how can I put it? The temptation, shall we say, of the drugs. You're talking the type of money you could make with drugs in 1 week is more than you would make, let's say, with a gambling parlor in 6 months. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, you put drug dealers on the street, you got like thousands of dollars every day coming in. I mean, the temptation is there. It's hard to resist. It's hard for a lot of people to resist that temptation.
And they would shake down drug dealers, take their money, have them sell it so that they're not culpable for it, right? They're still getting the money.
Right. But see, the thing is this: a lot of the drug dealers, when they got caught, they would mention whoever it was that they were working for.